Hello, everyone. This is Asha Singh Gaur, and welcome back to Unki Kalam se Hamari Kalam tak, presented by Literary Warriors Group. This program, Unki Kalam se Hamari Kalam tak, has been started to celebrate the poets and authors of yesteryears who have motivated us in their own way, in their unique way, to take up our pen and write. So here we are celebrating the one and only Satyajit Ray. This is a special episode because this is our first episode in English. There are a lot of authors of Indian origin who not only wrote in different languages of our land but also wrote in English very nicely with finesse. Satyajit Ray is one such name that you don't need any introduction, but most people know him as a director, as someone who weaved stories for the screen, for the celluloid. But he was also a very good author, an author, a writer with finesse, with different perspective, with different eye for his characters. And today we have a very special guest. We have Aarti Gaur, who is a very accomplished person named in a gaming industry and a big fan of Satyajit Ray. Satyajit Ray is a rare personality, a once in a lifetime personality. But today we will talk about Satyajit Ray, the author. He was born on 2nd of May 1921, and unfortunately we lost him on 23rd of April 1992. And what we will talk today about is the journey, his journey between these two dates, because a journey is so much more than the dates. And now I will call upon Aarti to talk about him. And before that, let me tell you who she is. So it's a very, very colorful introduction. Aarti Gaur is an art director, technical game artist. She began her career as a simulation animator and R&D support, working on cloth and hair simulations. The technical nature of her work led her to game development, and she started her game dev journey with modding and working as an animator and technical artist on a side-scrolling platform for Xbox Live. From there, she moved on to work for Design Unlimited, where she created custom art asset pipeline between Maya and Unreal and worked on shader creation techniques. After her stint at Design Unlimited, she started working independently and consulted for OSF in creating space development solutions using game engines. She parallelly co-founded Big Boot Games partnership, a video and tabletop development game studio with Nerith Roy. Notable titles: Monkonomics for iOS platform, Monarchy board game. Currently, the Big Boot Games team is working on Meteora, a fast paced combat racing experience where players get to play as a meteor. Meteora is inspired by their collective fascination of all things outer space and classic arcade games of the 90s. She is involved in the project as a visual designer, creative lead, and artist. It was selected in the first cohort of Sony India Hero project and is being developed for PC, PS5, and PSVR 2. Aarti has a background in English literature, psychology, and history of Indian art and architecture. So here comes the connection with literature. Her current studies are more focused towards game development and optimization techniques. She likes to spend her leisure days mainly reading, writing poetry, listening to music, and playing around with gaming engines. So here we invite Aarti Gaur to the platform. You are welcome to talk about your favorite author.
Thank you so much, and this is such an amazing, um, you know, I mean, this is like my evening. I couldn't have had a better evening on a leisure Sunday than speaking about Satyajit Ray. And I mean, I can go on and on about him because I kind of always look at him as not a personality, but almost like a phenomenon that he has been. He he was so much more than just a writer, just a filmmaker, just a humanitarian. But he was witty, and there's like small things that you can actually see in all his art, which is like as a drop show in there, and then so passionate, so unabashedly passionate about what he believed in, and as I said, this is like a perfect evening for me, just sitting there and speaking about him. So, as you've always, like you have already spoken about when we got him, like as a personality, I would just wanna give like some dates as to when we started, when he started his work, and you know, just introduced us into his world. So we are here to talk about him as an author, but he himself has written in some of his books as an introduction, where he never even imagined him as somebody who would connect with writing, or who would start writing, or writing being his domain or something like that. And he was so always fascinated by the development of films, and he always thought that that was what he was for, and that is what uh, you know um, that was his domain, let's say. Even though he actually started his work as working for an ad agency, which he himself did speak about once, saying that it was much more comfortable job and commercially beneficial. But films were something that always pulled him, and however great his work was going, it just, the passion of his towards film just like overtook, and he shifted gears. And that's when we got such a beautiful piece of art as his first movie in 1955, The Portrait Pachari, or as we say, The Song of the Road. So, just to give slight perspective towards what kind of character he was, or how I see him, like how passionate can somebody be to leave, that comfort, and just shift gears when you know that things are not going to be easy, and then come up with something that's so beautiful. Um, I don't know if many people know, but Martin Scorsese once had spoken about looking at Jose Pacelli and um, feeling that he never imagined that there were emotions like that that would even exist. So it was so beyond culture that it's not just the Bengalis who could actually relate to it so quickly because there was no language barrier. But the movie was so beautiful, the art was so beautiful that it did not need any medium. It was just there for you to, just take
I
in and connect with.
completely agree with that because I remember an interview where a Bollywood actress, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name, she has mentioned that it was so special for her to see the female portrayal in Satyajit Ray movies. So, whether you read his stories or you watch his films, the way he has portrayed women, even at that time, it's a very different eye. He did not portray women as a side character, he portrayed women as an individual. Even though whatever small or big part they played it as an individual. They did not play it as someone's aid. So that was something very special for even for the West to see women characters from his perspective. It was so special. So now let me ask one
So
question from you. That's okay, Aarti. You
I'm
have
just excited.
very absolutely. The subject itself is so intriguing and so special to talk about. And so tell me one thing that you come from a very different background. You are into gaming industry, but at the same time you have a background of literature as well. So where did both these things merge and when did you experience his work, his literary work for the first time? What excited you?
I think it's very funny uh, that during my studenthood and going through my course and going through the literature that I was reading, I have not come across any like in those 3 years when I was actually doing my English literature graduation. I did not come across Satyajit Ray's work, and that was that. But um, I hadn't gotten introduced to him because of my business partner, Narek Roy. He grew up on Satyajit Ray stories. And when we started talking about things, and I was so excited about almost all literature all the time, and the poems I was reading, and and these motifs in the books, and like for example, that I remember this one time I was discussing Frankenstein from Virginia Woolf with him, and I was discussing about these motifs that she had used, where you can actually see the depression that the author was going through, and at the same time, the you can say the different ideas that she was coming, her depression was leading to, you know, which actually came across as a monster in Frankenstein. And I think I was so taken by that story that I was going on and on and on about it. And then Ned told me that, have you ever read Satyajit Ray? So I did mention that, he has been a part of my childhood. Like I have grown up saying Gopiga and Bhagavan, right? Like, even though you can't understand the language because it was not my language, um, it never took me away from the screen, and I was so involved. And imagine the small bits that we could pick here and there. One of them is my favorite, and he says, what's the third sur and what's the fifth sur in Sarigama? And the person says, go and her. And he says, "Uga dekhe dikhate bahar nikhal," or something like that. And those small anecdotes here and there. So he's been a part, but as a director or as something that was entertaining, somebody who, and I did not connect with him as a director. I was connecting with his art. Um, so so even though he was a part of it, I never got introduced to his magic actually. So Ned gave me a book, and he said you should definitely read it and then tell me what you feel about it. And I think this was around 2009, 2007, or 2008. I don't remember clearly. And I actually do have the book with me. Just give me a second. Yeah. It's a short story book. It's an old one from Satyajit Ray. And this book also has a little writing of his own. And this is so he also was of the idea that the best translator of his works could be him, like he himself. And you can actually read the stories and you can actually understand why he ever thought that. And in this book, there is a story called Khagam, and I cannot explain the feeling. First and foremost, the book is, I mean, his writing is so simple. It's so precise, it's so simple that it never takes you away in the complexities of the language, but it takes you away into the complexities of a frame. So whenever he's writing even one sentence, he's actually painting a picture for you, and you can see it. So, and the best part was every writer can do that, and the good books actually do that. But Khagam specifically, because that was the very first writing of his that I got introduced to, it would make me hear things as well. So there is this one character. I would love people to read this particular story as their first as well, because it just had bowled me over. And there is a character, there is a snake in it, okay, and that it stays in a tree, in the hollow of a tree, and there is a sage who would call the snake Balkishan, and I am still getting goosebumps because you can actually hear it saying Balkishan. And I was like, I was so taken aback by that, and I went and I asked Ned, how did you hear, or did you have a sound for how the sage would call the snake? And he said the same thing, Balkishore. I'm like, oh my god, he actually does that. And that was his mastery. It's such simple words put together, and he will give you the sound and he will give you the picture, and that's it. And you make your own movie, and it is such a place to be in when you're reading a book. So I was just like, I need to read more, and that's how I just got into Satyajit Ray. And then it was just one story after another. Even before I came to the Feluda stories, which were the first literature that he actually started with, I had actually read his short stories, and every time I read them, I was like, he is his connection with the human element is so strong that you just can't leave it. You just and it's so relevant. You read it today. You must have read it like 20 years ago. Read it today, or if you read it 20 years, ahead, or from now, and you would still have that feeling that it's just so relevant, regardless of the time.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. Because when I started, my first introduction to Satyajit Ray was Gopi Guy and Bagha and it was such an inclusive part of our childhood that I don't know how many times I have seen that movie and enjoyed it with the same enthusiasm, same laughters every time.
So
So
true.
his writing is very atmospheric. I completely agree with you on that. And once you read one story, you want to read more because there is one very peculiar thing that I noticed in his writing. When you read Satyajit Ray, though all the portrayals are very natural, very real, you can see these characters around you. You can see these characters when you step out of the house. There are characters from the, like, a shopkeeper from a shop nearby, someone who is a house help, someone who is a watchman, very real characters. But at the same time, I noticed that his protagonist and the antagonist as well, most of these people come from a very affluent background. Either they have had a taste of luxury or they are living in luxury. So, what is your take on this?
That's such an interesting way to look at things, actually, um, because when we start with his work, we start usually at um, Pothir Patel, and Pothir Patel has no flaws.
True. So there is a conflict as well. You
Right.
mentioned it very clearly. When you read his books, most of the characters are like that. They stay in bungalows. They drive cars. We are talking about the early days when
Sure.
India had just got independence. And when we see his movies, then we get introduced to a completely different portrayal. So, yeah. So, what do you think about it?
So, as I said, that Pothir Patel has nothing of affluence to it, and it is such a I mean, I don't know if I still understand why is it Bosnia and Bachari, because sometimes think since it is the song of the road, is it road as your life journey, or what is it? Because you have these characters and every single character has like an arc to it, right? And that's like their life story. So whenever you go to them, so you have the grandmother, you have the brother, you have the sister, and so that is where he has started. That's his first expression into the world, right? But at the same time, we do have Felika, and Felika is like he's like the celebrated detective, right? And I kind of feel that Satyajit Ray was not this kind of person or a creative who was actually stuck in a frame, I would say. So when he was able to create stories or give you something like Pothir Pachari, he was also able to give you Opu Shongshar, which is the like Opu's childhood and how it comes to be. But at the same time, he's giving you a Felika who's a detective, right? And he's giving the sidekick as Topshe, because Feluda was the kind of like I when I was reading it, it kind of took me to my summer holidays. It had that feel of I am actually going to my grandpa's or grandma's house, and this is where all of this is happening, you know. And I have somebody who's like Feluda, who I really admire, and so if you see that Feluda is actually kids are able to connect with Feluda's stories because it is their perspective. everybody can connect to Tokshe, who's a teenager, who is almost in that summer holiday, zone, and is able to live a life along with Felida. And at that point, all the adventures are opening up. So it is that story that he brings back to school. Let's imagine that, right? And so it is more about that grandeur. This is what I did in my summer holiday. So that is what I did. So Satyajit Ray was able to give you that. Like your summer holidays are going to be like this grandiose thingy, and you can come back and give the stories. So in those stories, you see the cars and the zamindars and their problems and these emeralds or the gems getting missing, and you have like these really amazing artifacts that's getting missing. So you have everything of like this adventure, right? So that is where the affluence is required probably, because the kid's mind is all full of imagination and he was able to connect to that. He knew it. He kind of I don't know how he tapped into it, but he just did. But at the same time, the storybook that I'm talking about, in that you also have like right after Khagar, you have the second story, which speaks about this character who's called Portal Babu, and the story's name is Portal Babu Film Star. And you cannot have a character as ordinary as him, and have this short story about him in a film set where he's so insignificant. But what is happening, because it is him as a central character, it's important for him and everything that he can feel. So that humanity that is just so innate to him just comes out in these characters that he keeps creating, and that's why I started as I did. That I don't think that he ever was confined to a frame. He could very easily imagine and connect to different um, you know different people, ages, and still have this amazing thing going and giving us this expression that was so beautiful in every single creation of his. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but this is how I see him.
No, of course, you did answer my question. I completely agree with you that the way he connected with human psychology, especially children, was very unique. Because when I saw, Gopi Gain Bagha Bain and Gopi and Bagha Fire Elo, I was so mesmerized with the person who could understand a child's brain so well. What story and what portrayal would excite a child, because it was such a beautifully made movie, and I not for once did I thought that it was made for adults. It was my movie and I wanted to watch it every time.
So true.
So absolutely. And because you have spoken about Feluda so much, let me tell you, our viewers, we have very wonderful people who are here, who have joined us. Uh, Rupa Rao ji joined us. Neelam Saxena ji is here with us, listening to our conversation. Gayatri Joshi ji is enjoying the talk. Neelam ji is saying that I am a lover of Satyajit Ray, and Neelam ji, who's not? We love him for his work. So people know Jeffrey Archer, people know Sidney Sheldon, people don't know Feluda. And Satyajit Ray is Feluda. Tell us about him.
I would slightly disagree that people don't know Felga. People do know Felga, and you know him so much. Um, I I wouldn't disagree completely. Let's just say that. But it's the thing is the people who have uh, gotten introduced to Satyajit Ray's work, and they are far and wide and plenty. They all know Feluda, and they because they know Feluda, that's why we have all these translations. Because however we see him as a creative, we also see him as somebody who was so um, who knew what the people wanted. So because there were so many people who kept sending him translations, this was this one time that people kept sending him translations, without him agreeing to anyone doing the translations for his work. They would just keep sending it to him, thinking that if he liked it, he would just pick it, and then they would be able to bring it out in English and in other languages, because then everybody would be able to just connect with it directly. And that is when he thought that the translations are required because there was so much, you know, like there were so many people reaching out to him. So let's just say that the idea that Feluda is not as well known probably is just as true as I would say um, it would be just like as many people are introduced to Satyajit Ray, they all know Feluda. And the good thing was that he got it translated, and then we all could actually read the adventures of him. And um, and if you see that the representation of Feluda is actually so much. People kept saying that it was so much like Sherlock Holmes, but he he's his own thing. Like he has these adventures, and it just shows that he was so. He had a not fascination, maybe slightly fan sort of a thing towards Conan Doyle and let's say Edward Lear, and their kind of adventure shows up in how Feluda was written. But I think when he was writing it, because he started writing Feluda as I think a part of Sandesh, which was the magazine that his grandfather had started, Upendra Kishore Ray, if I'm not wrong, back in 1913. Yeah, something about that time. And so this was a kids' magazine. And he couldn't run it for a very long time because he passed away in 1915 or just 2 years after, 2.5 years after he had started it. And Shukumar Roy, he kept on with the work. So, so for Satyajit Ray to have once said that I would never be, a writer, even after growing up, seeing all of these things, and like the whole printing press stuff happening, and they have half of their house being like the residential area and half of the house as the printing press, and then the limericks coming out from Shukumar Roy, and then he reading it, connecting with it because he was a child himself. And Shukumar Ray's writings for children is just something. So a lot of people, I think, would have gone through his limericks, which are called Abu Tabu, uh, which is like nonsense verses, and it's like super witty, super cute and funny, so he grew up with all that, but he never connected with it. And in 1961, just sitting with his friend nonchalantly thinking that they should actually revive Shandesh. And I don't know whether it was about the sweet Shandesh or the message Sandesh, but that's the magazine. And they started writing about, and that is when he started with Feluda, and he gave us something which was which was Topshe and Feluda and Lal Mohan Babu, and then their characters. So I think he has been such a phenomena in his time that I wouldn't agree completely that people don't know him. But I'm also sad about the part that a lot of children, as we are, passing from decade to decade, are not introduced to him. So now we have less viewership, and now we look forward to a lot of what Sherlock Holmes did, or his stories and his adventures. But a lot of these kids are not introduced to Feluda, and they are missing out. So only if we started introducing our kids to this whole, like the wonder world of Feluda, I think this question would not arise at all because it's just so magical. But there is this introduction that is missing. So we have such an amazing fan following in this one age group, and then we have absolutely nothing because we failed to introduce it. So I think that's it's probably us more than him.
True, absolutely. So that is the basic theme of this program as well, because in some way or the other, we want to introduce the new generation, the new kids, to the gems that we have in our literature in different languages, whether it is Hindi, Gujarati, Marathi, Bengali, uh, and English as well. So most of his work was first written in Bengali, and then it was written in English. And I will not say that, I knew Feluda only through my research. When I was researching for Satyajit Ray, I have read his short stories. I was so excited by his writing because, again, it was very simple and very atmospherical. You could feel everything. And then I came to know about Feluda. So now, because we are doing this program today, and through your immense knowledge and excitement about his work, maybe we will be able to pass it on to the students who don't know about it, the kids who don't know about
So
it.
hope. I so hope. I'm still
Now,
learning about him.
yes, there's so much to learn about his writing. Now, there's one more thing very peculiar to Satyajit Ray, which became an international news as well, and then I felt it in his stories as well. Satyajit Ray has written a lot of thrillers and a lot of horror. And now, when I talk about horror, there are stories where he has mentioned about the carnivorous plants and the way he has described the carnivorous plants. That is the face of all the aliens that I see in today's movies. And I'm sorry, I'm just saying it, it's my opinion. Stranger Things. What you see in Stranger Things is something that Satyajit Ray has imagined and described in one of his stories. So, different and a very beautiful world of his, he has created so much with such an international appeal. So, would you like to talk about his, imagination of outer space, the creatures, and horror? He was in love with horror, I think.
Oh, I yes, he actually. I do remember reading like a small excerpt from something that I can't remember where I read it, but he did mention like very eloquently like how uh, space and aliens and everything that was a little metaphysical fascinated him. And if you actually see, even in the Farida stories, you could actually see it, here and there somewhere, that he does, deal with it ever so slightly, because Farida probably as I said, that he just knew which frame, what element to fit in which frame. But then he also came about with um, Shonku, Dr. Shonku, I think, where he actually expanded over his whole fascination of all these metaphysical things. And I think that also did put such an influence onto us. Look at our game that we're making. It's Meteor. It's all about space. It's because when we were reading it, it's so different from the space that he imagines in the aliens and the characters that he deals with. But it's just the whole idea of the unknown that he was so fascinated with. And because it is unknown, imagine that you have the liberty to just draw anything, like that is where you let your imagination go completely wild. And as you mentioned about Stranger Things, this is such a now thing. And I'm just looping back to something that I'd said, that Satyajit Ray wrote things which are timeless. It's so
Timeless.
relevant in whichever frame that you are. And I do remember there's this one story about him where he had written a script which was about an alien coming to the earth and everything, and he had sent it to. He had spoken about that script with somebody in Hollywood. I'm forgetting the name, and
Steven
then that person.
Spielberg.
No, that person asked him to send it to Spielberg because he thought that there was a movie that was supposed to be made, and he did that. He didn't hear from them at all, and then ET happens, which is very close to the story that he had written. So,
Yes,
so I'm just saying, like, I think uh, I don't know what his brain was. It was such a phenomenon. It's just so magical. Like he, he's like, I think that he's also mentioned Burns' work, which had inspired him, and I think these things comes from there as well because again he deals with these completely magical, imaginary things which are so wide out from the you know the place that we live in. And again, the half physical, metaphysical world sort of a thing. So he's played a lot with it. I don't know what to say about it. It's just so magical.
it is definitely very magical. So now, of course, when I was reading his stories, I was reading Indigo.
Ah,
And until I read the stories, I didn't have an idea what Indigo will be about. Then I opened it, I started reading it. It was a collection of stories, and then came the story Indigo. And I had no idea that Indigo, I'm opening it up because I don't know how many of you have already read Indigo. It's a horror story. And his horror stories are not onto your face or gory. His horror stories are really atmospheric. The way he has written all his stories, you could feel them. You could feel the horror. Not the way you see in the movies, but the way, the slightest brush of air that you feel in your real life. And that spooks you
Don't
without
you
being gory.
don't you feel that his stories of uh, the the ghosts, let's just call them, is very much like how we spin the stories when we were kids. Like, this happened and that happened, and a little more suave, much more suave, much more well presented, but actually coming out of kids' brain, like absolutely beyond any limits, and anything can happen. And he brings it all together, and then he presents it in a way where when you're reading it, you don't need any sound for any jump scares. You're just reading it and you're feeling the eeriness of the atmosphere that he's, kind of weaving around you. And it's just like it's so uncomfortable, and it is fascinating, and it is exciting. And even though you're spooked already, you still want to know in the next word and the next line and the end of the sentence that what exactly is happening. So yeah, what do you think about that?
I completely agree with you on that because once I started reading Indigo, I couldn't stop on one story. Because once I realized I love horror, and people know me for that. And subtle horror, because the things which happen around us, it's sometimes not what we see on the screen, but his stories were so real. His stories were so something that I have already experienced. So you feel that okay, this happens. They were so real. So one after another, I kept on reading the stories. So his way of writing, it pulls you in. It does not, you feel unsatiated. You want to read more. You want to know more. You want to see his, extent to which he can go. But as a reader, as someone who has appreciated his work, I think it's a it's a continuous process. You can't stop on one. Once you start reading him, you want to read more. And then once you read them and you realize that, oh, someone else has made a movie inspired by the same story, because the story that you just mentioned, uh, I'm not, I don't remember the name, the person on the film set. The same
Color
story
Bubble Crystal, yes.
was recreated by, if I'm not mistaken, I think, um,
I don't know, was it
it was
Nightmare?
recreated it was recreated by another director for a ensemble of stories. I think Mumbai Talkies, one of the stories was inspired by Satyajit Ray
Yes, yes.
story. So when I read the book, I was like, oh, this is where it came from. The emotions, the father, how he is convincing his child that he is such a big thing, so that the child feels proud of the father for such a meager thing that happened on the film set. So it's absolutely beautiful to keep all the different emotions, all the different portrayals together, and so beautifully that they just complement each other. There's no conflict.
When you say it, actually, it just makes me feel like how the sense of how when you're watching The Beautiful Mind, there's this movie which is about the same emotion, and it's like the whole movie that takes that's happening across this whole kind of, I think, about 3 hours. It's a movie, and this story is like literally about 4 pages or something. It actually gives us the same emotion, just every line after the line, and you can have that emotion just rising up to you until the last line, and like the last frame is kind of played out, and that's his magic. So simple. The That actually reminds me. I think the mastery that Satyajit Ray is, as what he is, it's about just keeping things so simple. The writing is so simple. Every emotion is so big, but he presents that emotion in such soft, simple words and small, short sentence formations. And he does not go about, just how to say, embellishing with words and languages and making things just a little too much for what they are. But the emotion on every single word that he puts onto that paper is so huge that you just feel it's so relatable, and he brings you in so quickly that he just makes you a part of his world in a matter of minutes. And that's the mastery of Satyajit Ray, is what I always feel whenever I'm reading him.
That's beautiful. So tell me one thing. Of course, Satyajit Ray was an amazing author, but we most of us know him as a filmmaker. Now you are also in a field where you play with light a lot, and Satyajit Ray was one artist when he was creating movies. He used light in various different ways because by then Indian film industry was not that big, so people had to maneuver their way around to get things done, and Satyajit Ray had done things which West started doing way later. So how do you connect with his work as a game creator, a game developer?
Oh my god. So very first thing that I actually enjoyed in his work was like, I wouldn't say it was the visual, I, I would actually say the portrayal, as you had mentioned before, of each character. What was it that he was presenting to us? Which story? What is the premise? Why do we need to hear the story? That was so much more important for me when I was, watching his movies. The thing that got me to literally just love him as that creator, as a director, that his imprint was everywhere in the movie. He was so meticulous about everything, like the frame, the lighting, the character development, the dialogue, you know, because most of the character sketch comes from the dialogue, right? That is what he's writing, the script and everything. So he had his element into every single thing of that movie. And then came the visual. I had like this the very iconic scene of the train passing by, the Kash pool actually just swaying, the cloud coming together, and it's just about to rain, and they just running through, the field. That visual was like, how do you think that in your head if you have not created a picture? Like, you actually have that drawing in your head so clear that this is what it is. And then, because you know the drawing, okay, this is how the light switch will happen. So I think because he was not this one thing, like, it was not just a writer, he was not just a director. He was everything. He was a painter. He used to sketch. He used to do everything. He kind of understood everything together. So he saw the whole thing as a frame, like in totality, and that would have helped him. Just give me 1 second. Sorry about that. So that would have helped him, I think, to put together such beautiful frames. For example, we have so that is about Pocket Pachari, but then you have these things happening in Nayak. You have the whole there is this one sequence where it was just a dream sequence of Uttam Kumar actually just finding him in this sea of currency, the notes, like, the stacks of notes everywhere, and he's just like drowning and drowning, and nobody can pick him up. And it's so scary to actually tap into something like that and create a frame like this for somebody to see, and then make the people feel that they need to gasp for, you're gasping for air. You really need. He actually makes you feel that you're drowning with that frame. You know, so it's just as he just, because he sees like the whole film. He just knew, like, as we say, a director always sees the whole movie. before he starts shooting it. That was, I think that comes from him because he literally knew exactly every single frame as he would be stitching it together, because he knew this is what he wants the audience to feel. And that's what he did. He presented it, and then I think it's much more than just lighting. It's just about that expression, that feeling that he wanted to invoke in every single frame of his movie, and he did it so masterfully. But I also think he was able to do it because he was not limiting himself for the resources that he had, as he very famously mentioned in his Oscar speech, that he was always so fascinated by the movies of the West, and not the movies for the context or the content, but the movies in the way they were made, the way, like how big, how huge, how large than life, and how they would invoke certain feeling in this frame and all of that. And he read it so much. I remember reading it somewhere that he was made a part of British Film Society, and in a matter of 4 months or something, he had seen 999 movies. I probably would be missing numbers here and there, but imagine somebody's passion for understanding what this art form is, to have finished watching 999 movies in 4 months. You know, that was him. And
Absolutely.
that is what he was looking for, like, what frame actually gives you what expression. Maybe that was the way he was learning. And then all that learning, I don't know what he learned from it. Of course you can't, because it was his mind. But then he just like took all of it in and presented us with all that amazing movies. Like, the last movie I watched of Satyajit Ray's was Kanchenjunga, and that was made in 1969. And I'm doing a little segue here from his lights and his presentation. But while I was watching it, it's such a still movie. It actually happens in Darjeeling and around this very specific part and an area, and it actually just speaks about a woman and what she's feeling, and she's not feeling free, and she wants to take her life in her own control and everything. And I just fell in love with this person. Can you imagine him presenting such a movie in 1969? It's all about feminism, as you were saying. And I wouldn't say feminism in the most loose manner. I want to say that in the way that he was actually exploring the idea of equality then, and so beautiful. And then he brings it to a conclusion where he leaves it on to you to take that from the movie, because it's the stillness. And he presents that stillness of somebody's life, the central character who's a woman, through the stillness of a hill station. In the valley near Kanchenjunga, it's so still, it's so misty, nothing is moving. And that is the depiction metaphorically of the life
Metaphorically. Yes.
woman, and her expressions coming out, and she's trying to express, you know and so beautiful. How are you able to invoke that if you didn't feel it that strong? It's so beautiful.
Absolutely. And you have described it with equal beauty. So thank you so much, Aarti.
I
Because
would be so happy if people actually went about and saw his work, and just went, just fangirling like me as I'm doing right now.
true. Now we have Abdul Rahim ji who is liking the program, and he mentioned that more of these initiatives. Please, Abdul ji, definitely we are here to introduce our viewers with more such gems of Indian literature. So, before we conclude this program, you have read Satyajit Ray a lot, extensively. So, for someone who only knows Satyajit Ray as a film director, a creator, and wants to start reading after watching this program, what are the books that you will suggest? Do you have anything to show right now?
Oh yes, okay. So if somebody is, so there are a couple of things, right? And it absolutely is because his creative is like so spread out, right? And if you were somebody who's actually looking for adventure, you know and if you're just like starting off, I would say, or you want your kids to get into it, if that's the goal, please start with film. This is all the adventure they need. It's so beautiful, it's so simple, but it just opens your mind as a kid. I mean, I still read it and I still feel like a kid. and I'm no kid at all right now. But you can still do that to me. So I can completely say that if you are looking for literature for your kids, please go ahead. Start with Shona Kella, the Golden Fortress. That would be one. If it is for you and you want to start, I would say start with a short story compilation. I have, I think I could suggest um,
Indigo can be a good start.
Indigo will be a very good start. Yes, I would always go to Khagam. I don't know why, but yes, please do Khagam. That would be the most beautiful thing. But I have connected to it that way. I'm sure
So
that
now
was.
that you have spoken about Khagam so much, I have to start reading Khagam.
Please do. Please, you have to. I will give you the book in which it is, so you don't even have to look for it. But yes, so you can start with Khagam. If you are interested in, so it's a very interesting thing about Satyajit Ray. He's never spoken about himself as such until he wrote about himself in again Sandesh in small, I think it was weeklies or something, which he had started under the name of Jokhon Chogo Chila, that is childhood days. And so, if you want to know more about him as a person and his writings and all of those things, then you should start with childhood days, which is the English translation, or go for Jokhon Chogo Chila, which is the Bengali translation. If you're more into science fictions, then you should definitely go for Professor Shonku. That's the alien science fiction sort of stuff. So as I said, like he's so far and wide, and if you're literally into movies and want to see like the subjects and the way that he's actually treated them, um, then I wouldn't say Portrait Pachali is the only thing. He's literally made movies like Kanchenjunga, but then there is Agar, that is a stranger. It's a beautiful story. You can start with that movie. There is Ghare Bahare, the world and the home and the world. That's also a very beautiful movie. Mahanagar. It's an amazing movie that shows a transition from a transition of a household from a single very patriarchal household to a very not a nuclear but a liberal household, just like accepting how the world is changing. That's for Mahanagar. Beautiful, beautiful movie. So if you're into movies, start with that. If so, as I said, that he's got things for everybody. And if you're literally into just having fun, read his limericks. It's so funny, and he actually comes out. I mean, the wits that this person has, like the you can actually see it in the characters that he creates, right? So like Lavan Babu. So there is there is just everything, just like or just go with this book. This is like the compilation of this, and it's called The Complete Adventures of Feluda by Satyajit Ray. It's got all the Feluda stories, so you can go with that. So very honestly, I'm such a fangirl. I have Feluda stories like as like separate books, and then I have the compilations, and I keep going and buying something, thinking that probably I'm missing one story here and there. So it's just that if you want to know more about him, then I think childhood days is perfect. It just gives us a peek into his childhood. It's a fascinating place. Growing up in a place where you have open to show like talents, who are doing these great things and creating these stories for you, and then you're growing up uh, reading that and then becoming like a phenomenon that Satyajit Ray is. And so yeah, there is so much. But as I said, for kids, Feluda. For if you're going for yourself, short story compilations. If you're looking into his world, childhood days, and if you're looking into movies, then Mahanagar. Please start with Mahanagar. That would be beautiful.
Oh, sweet. Thank you so much, Aarti. The conversation was so sweet, so intense, and you had so much to share with us. It's going to be 1 hour, and I still have so much more to know. But thank you so much for sharing your knowledge about Satyajit Ray, introducing an immense talent. And I wish I could meet him to see how he processes his thoughts and everything what he did. And his was the first Oscar that came to India, and there is a reason. When you read him, when you see his work, you understand that it was a lot of work. The way we say you have to read 1,000 books to write one poem, that is what it was. It was an ocean of knowledge that he absorbed before he became the person he was. So I can't thank you enough for sharing this evening with us, Aarti. And thank you so much to all the viewers who joined us and who commented such beautiful comments about the event. Aarti, I would request you, once this is done, please go on to the page, check the comments, please share your replies, reply to those comments. Abdul ji mentioned that he listens to Bengali audiobooks every Sunday, especially Feluda. I can imagine that once you have heard them, you would like to hear all of them. So that's wonderful, Abdul ji. With that, we have come to the end of this program. So here it's time to say goodbye. Thank you so much, Aarti, for joining us. And
Thank you
thank you
so
so
much for
much to
having
all the
me.
viewers.
Thank you so much for having me. I couldn't have, as I said before, couldn't have had a better evening. And what a subject! And I just hope that I was able to, bring you all into very small works of his. But he is such a phenomenon. It's like so much far and wide. Um, he's just something that we need to discuss much more. There is so much.
Absolutely. So today was about the Satyajit Ray as an author. Maybe one day we will have Satyajit Ray as a filmmaker and completely technical thing. I read your introduction. There was a lot of technical verbiage in that. So next time we will have a technical know-how
I
about
hope I can do
Satyajit Ray's work.
I hope I could do justice. I don't think I am in that position because it was such a different medium. But when it comes to what he was able to weave in the emotions, because I felt it, with his work, I probably will be able to take you through my journey and introduce some works of his, and then leave you to it because I'm sure all of us will connect with him, but differently. And yeah, that's Satyajit Ray.
Sure, absolutely. So for now, goodbye, good evening, and have a wonderful Sunday. Thank you so much for joining us.
Bye.